This is the brand new Garmin Forerunner 570, and this is the now 2-year-old Forerunner 265. Now, despite their names, these two watches have a lot in common, and there is one big difference between the two: the price. Now, in this video today, I want to run through all of the features and specs between these two models to try to help you understand the differences, so hopefully you can make the right decision on which one you purchase. So if you missed it, yesterday I actually posted a video where I went out to New York City and met up with Garmin for the launch of the new Forerunner 570 and the new 970. Now, if you want to learn the ins and outs and all of the nitty-gritty details about these new watches, I have a whole dedicated video about that. In this video, though, I want to compare the 570 to the 265 because despite their names, the 570 is sort of the evolution of the 265. They should have just called this like the 270. So just to be clear, throughout this video, the white watch on the left here is the Garmin Forerunner 265. The black watch on the right here is the new 570. And that's going to get pretty confusing because, again, they look pretty similar. From a distance, it's really hard to tell them apart. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about the price and the options available at launch. The Garmin Forerunner 265, the older model here, can be found discounted because it's a couple of years old. It's even available on Garmin's own website. Currently, this watch here in the USA is retailing for about $350. Now, that's going to differ on what day you check and what country you live in, but in general, you can expect this watch to be discounted now that it's a couple of years old. Jumping back over to the new Forerunner 570, this watch is significantly more expensive. Like I said before, this watch currently retails for $550 at launch. And again, no discounts because it just was announced yesterday. It also comes in two sizes, just like the 265. There's the small 42mm form factor, and then there's the larger 47mm form factor. Now that is slightly different than the 265's 46mm form factor, but as you can see on the table here, they're nearly identical in size. You're not really gonna notice 1mm on your wrist. Another difference with the Forerunner 570 is that there's a lot of color options to choose from, and they're pretty wild. In my opinion, they're kind of cool. There's like a mango color, there's this black color, there's one with like a purple sort of accent around the bezel, and they really got adventurous with their color options, which I kind of appreciate, while still leaving sort of the staple black color available for those who aren't so adventurous. Another change with the 570 is that some of the color options actually have translucent bands. In fact, this black version I have here has a slightly see-through band. It's really hard to notice. You can sort of see the color of my table through it when I put my finger behind it. Moving on, let's talk about the hardware between the 265 and the 570. Like I said before, they called this the 570 because it's slightly more premium. And as you can see, it just has a more premium look to it. That's mainly due to the fact that it now has an aluminum bezel around the display here, while the older Forerunner 265 here is pretty much entirely made out of plastic. Flipping the watches on the side here, you can see that Garmin's also given up that dedicated run button that was sort of pill-shaped from the past and moved towards a more traditional round metal button on the 570. Flipping over to the other side, again, you're going to see 3 buttons between the two watches on both. They both use the standard 5-button layout. When it comes to size and weight, like I said, the Forerunner 570 is 1mm bigger if you go for the larger form factor, and it's about the same thickness, even though it is spec'd out to be a little bit thicker. Again, it's not something you notice on your wrist. Another thing is that the 570 is slightly heavier by about 3 grams, but again, 3 grams is really hard to notice on your wrist, especially if you're used to wearing a big watch like I am. I find both of these watches to be very comfortable. Flipping these watches over, you're going to notice a couple of things. First of all, the heart rate sensors. Back on the Forerunner 265 here, it uses Garmin's older Gen 4 heart rate sensor, while the new Forerunner 570 uses Garmin's Gen 5 heart rate sensor. The main difference between these two, as you can see, is that the black watch on the right, the 570, has more LEDs. That means it's emitting more light into your skin, and because of that, it is marginally more accurate in some activities. I say some activities because for a lot of steady state activities, like if you're just running at a pretty casual pace and your wrist is not moving around that much, the Gen 4 heart rate sensor is accurate enough. But if you are doing more demanding things, like you're mountain biking down a gravel path and your hands are really shaking around, that's where you're going to see a slight advantage on the Gen 5 heart rate sensor. Another difference between the heart rate sensors is that the new Gen 5 sensor on the 570 also supports additional metrics like skin temperature detection. However, unlike other Garmin watches with this heart rate sensor, it does not support ECG or electrocardiogram, which I thought was kind of odd because every watch with this heart rate sensor, whether that be the Garmin Venue 3, which is actually cheaper than this watch, all the way up to the Garmin Fenix 8 or Tactics 8 here, all of the watches with that sensor support ECG except for this new Garmin Forerunner 570. I don't know if that's a hardware limitation or it's something they can unlock in the future, but I did find that kind of odd. Let's jump back to the front of these watches so we can talk about their displays, because that's one of the bigger changes to these watches. So both of these watches do feature really nice AMOLED touch-enabled displays. I can swipe around on them, and they're both very responsive and quick, and they're really nice displays. The Garmin Forerunner 570, though, does get a slightly larger display. This display is 1.4 inches, while the 265 here is 1.3 inches, and if you go for the smaller version, it'll be 1.2 inches versus 1.1 inches. Now that's not a big difference in terms of screen real estate. As you can see when I swipe through the menus here, they kind of look the same size, but it is something you notice on occasion. With that being said, the major difference between these displays comes down to the brightness. The new 570 has the brightest display that Garmin has ever made on a watch, and they stated that this display is roughly 2 times brighter than the previous model on the 265. As you can see here in this indoor setting, you can notice the brightness right here. They are both on the same settings, they're in default settings, so it's that sort of medium brightness setting, and even with this setting, the 570 here just looks more vibrant and punchy and brighter and easier to read, even in this indoor setting. With that being said, if I didn't have this watch here to compare to the 265, I wouldn't complain about the 265. In fact, it's got a fantastic display, and when I reviewed this watch a couple of years ago, I was a big fan of the display. Where you will notice this increased brightness though is when you're outside. If you're out doing a run or a bike ride in blaring direct sunlight, where the sun is really hitting you at the wrong angle and making it difficult to see your display, that's where the increased brightness of the 570 will really shine and sort of punch through that brightness to let you see what's going on in your watch. And just jumping back to the 265 here, this watch I think has about 1,000 nits of brightness, and even in bright conditions, I really had no issues. The 570 just takes it one step further, making it a little bit easier to see in direct sunlight. Now in terms of durability, both watches do feature a Gorilla Glass display on the front of the watches here, and if you look closely on my 265 here, I've had this watch for a couple of years, there are a couple of scratches on it, because to be honest, I'm not super careful with my watches. I tend to throw them around and I go trail running and hiking with them and bump them off rocks when I'm rock climbing and things like that. And because of that, there is some minor scratches on the lens, although it's really hard to see. They're very micro scratches, so the Gorilla Glass did do its job. The unfortunate thing about these watches is by design, the watch's display is actually curved and protrudes out from the front of the watch. So if you put these face down on the ground, the first thing to make contact will be that display. Hey, quick interruption. If you're finding this video informative or helpful in any way, I would really appreciate it if you went down and hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss more videos like this in the future. And after you do that, also check out all the links in the description down below where you can pick up one of these watches. Okay, back to the video. Moving right along to the next topic, sensors. Both of these watches basically have the same suite of sensors. You've got the obvious things like GPS and heart rate sensing, but there's also a barometric altimeter on both watches, a compass, a thermometer, and a couple of more, like a gyroscope and accelerometer. Another similarity between both watches is that they both offer multi-band GNSS or GPS for tracking your activities. I need to do more testing on the 570 to confirm that it's just as good as the older models since I just got this watch. But what I can say is most of the multi-band devices I've tested from Garmin, whether that be the Fenix 8, the 965, the 265, and more, they've all performed pretty well. So I have no doubts about the 570 here either. Now, when it comes to the user interface or operating system between these watches, they are very similar again. As you can see when I scroll down, the widget glances kind of look the same. There are some minor differences between the two. I would say the new 570 here sort of leans in the direction of the Fenix 8's operating system, where the 265 is kind of on its own. Pretty much all the graphics and animations and everything kind of look the same throughout the entire menu system. If I hit the start button on both watches, you will notice a slight difference here as well. well, where on the new 570, it gets that sort of Fenix 8 style menu system where you've got this activities menu at the top here to dive into runs and bike rides and things like that. And then below that, you have all of your apps for workouts, clocks, your phone. We'll talk more on that in a minute, your music and more. Jumping back to the 265 here, when you hit that start button, it just dives directly into the activities menu. It doesn't really bring you to your apps list of sorts. However, if you do scroll down in this menu, you will eventually get to all of your apps, whether that be the Connect IQ store or Health Snapshot or whatever you want to do. And that's a good segue into smartwatch features between these two watches. Again, a lot of similarities here. Both these watches have all of the basics like your phone notification support, incoming call notifications, text notifications, and a really useful weather widget, as you can see here, to see your current weather and a forecast for upcoming days. They both support offline music. As you can see here, I've got my music widget. I haven't set them up on these watches, but you can download MP3 files, you can sync your Spotify playlists, you can use iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and a couple of other services. And again, in terms of music storage, they're identical there as well, where both watches feature 8 gigabytes of internal storage for your Connect IQ apps, your watch faces, your course downloads, and music, and all of that other stuff. When it comes to smartwatch features though, there is one standout feature on the 570 that the 265 simply does not have, and that is the addition of a speaker and microphone. With this watch, you can integrate with your Siri or Google Assistant or whatever assistant you have on your phone, and it actually has offline voice commands as well. You can simply hold the start button here. What's the weather? And as you can see there, it just launched the weather app because I talked to it. Now you can use the offline voice commands for a variety of things. You can start the flashlight and use the screen as a flashlight. You can start an activity, for example, start a run. And you can take and make phone calls directly on your watch without interacting with your phone. Now keep in mind, these watches are not LTE or cellular enabled, so you will need your phone nearby connected via Bluetooth to make that all work. Another benefit of having the built-in speaker and microphone on board is that the tones are a little bit different. For example, if I go and start a run, when I click start, you hear that little beep? It's a more, I don't know, pleasing sound compared to the beeps of the past. Let's just do a comparison for fun. Here on the 265, it sounds like that. So just a digital little piezo buzzer thing that's inside the watch, where this watch actually has a speaker so it can make all kinds of sounds. Now, when it comes to activity profiles on these watches, again, very similar here as well. Both watches feature a similar set of profiles like basic running, cycling, snow and water sports like swimming, and a lot more. Pretty much everything to cover your bases, even if you're a multi-sport athlete doing triathlons. The Garmin Forerunner 570 does get additional sport profiles though, in the form of additional multi-sport profiles like duathlon, brick, pool tri, swim, run, and a couple of more. The 570 also features more running and cycling modes. You've got obstacle racing, ultra running, gravel biking, bike commuting, cyclocross, and BMX, where the 265 does lack those features. Generally speaking, I'll let you read the list for yourself. The 570 just has more activity profiles to choose from, but a lot of them are simply just copy-paste from other activities. For example, if you do the BMX activity, it doesn't really offer any additional metrics compared to just a cycling activity. Still though, if you want to organize all your activities and have more granular detail on what you did, it is nice to have the additional profiles. Another feature on the Forerunner 570 might make a big difference to you, and it might be a deal breaker on the Forerunner 265, and that is for specific use in golfing. If you are a golfer and you want a golf computer, the Forerunner 570 has the golf app on board. And this has all kinds of different courses from all over the world. It'll show you how far you are from the next hole. And I'm not a big golfer, so I'm just speaking broadly here. But from what I've heard, it's a really useful tool if you are into golfing, where on the Forerunner 265, it does lack that feature. All right, let's talk about training tools. So as you can see here, if I scroll through my widgets, I've got a similar set of wellness and training tools to choose from. Everything from body battery, training readiness, training status, estimated VO2 max, training recovery, health tracking, HRV status. It's pretty much all the same across the board here. However, the 570 here does get a couple of extra training tools, and one example of that is the projected race time predictor. Now, for this feature to work, you'll need to add a race to your calendar like I have here. I've got my next ultra marathon in the calendar, 9 weeks away. That is scary. But if you do that, it'll actually be able to come up with a prediction of your completion time of that next race based on your current training level and whether or not you kept that consistent over the next period of time before that race. Jumping back to the 265, it does have a race predictor. It'll tell you your 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon times and predict that for you, but it won't project that out to some time in the future. It's just based on your current fitness level. There are a couple of more features on the 570 that the 265 doesn't have. Another example of that is something called distance by timing gate, and this one's kind of complicated, but the idea is you can correct your distance at your next marathon or 10K or 5K based on the timing gates of that race. So you can sort of correct the distance if your GPS is off on your watch. And one more example of a new feature on the 570 the 265 doesn't have is another one called suggested finish. And I thought this one was really clever and hopefully can be added to older watches as well. Essentially, the watch can detect when you finish your race if you've got a course loaded on your watch. So when you cross the finish line, if you don't hit that stop button on the watch, it'll actually buzz and remind you, hey, you finished the race, you should hit stop. Okay, moving on to the next topic, battery life, because that's where things get kind of odd with the new 570, because across the board, it actually has less battery life compared to the older 265 from a couple of years ago. So on the Garmin Forerunner 265, the larger 46mm option, you get 13 days of battery life in typical use in smartwatch mode without activities. You could get up to 20 hours in GPS only mode, or if you wanted the best accuracy, about 14 hours in multi-band GNSS mode. Jumping back to the 570 here for comparison, that 13 days of the 265 is reduced down to 11 days on the 570. That 20 hours in GPS mode is reduced down to 18 hours on the 570, and in multi-band mode, it's the same between the 265 and the new 570, which is, again, kind of odd. Now, that battery difference is even more exaggerated in the smaller 42mm form factors of these watches. Now, when I spoke to Garmin about this, they told me that slight decrease in battery life across the board is due to the brighter display on the new 570, along with additional components like the speaker and microphone being on board. And I kind of get that, it sort of makes sense, but it's also kind of a bummer that we're losing battery life instead of gaining it, because that is one feature a lot of people care about. Still though, for those of you running marathons or even like a 50K or 50 miler, the battery life on these watches is going to be totally fine for you. You're really only going to run into some problems if you are running something like a 100 miler or doing those ultra long distances. That's where you're going to end up needing to charge mid-race, and in 2025, no one wants to do that anymore. And in terms of navigation and mapping between these two watches, again, identical between the two. Neither of these watches have full offline mapping. However, they do have breadcrumb navigation, so you can create and load a course into the watch and then follow it in real time during your activity. So if you're hiking or trail running and you want to know where to go, you can still do that here. You just don't get a context of your surroundings like roads and trails and waterways. That's all reserved for the higher end models like the new 970 or the Fenix line. Okay, now that we've gone through all of the differences between these two watches, what do I think about the new Garmin Forerunner 570 compared to the 265? At the end of the day, the real standout features on the new 570, it really boils down to the brighter display, a slightly updated user interface, slightly more premium build with that aluminum bezel, a couple of new training metrics, more activity profiles, and of course that speaker and microphone, which I think a lot of people care about. Other than that, the Forerunner 570 is almost identical to the 265 in just about every way, and that begs the question, who is the Forerunner 570 for at that $549 price tag? In my opinion, this price is a little bit high for what you're getting here. Don't get me wrong, I really do like the Forerunner 570. This is a great watch. I've enjoyed using it for the past day or so, but at $550, there's a lot of competition out there, and a lot of that competition has features like ECG and mapping, which simply don't exist here. I think those two features alone with ECG and mapping would have been enough of a justification to upgrade from a 265 to the new 570 and spend that extra money to get those new features, but they're simply not here. So it's a tough call. The Forerunner 265 definitely represents a much better value at this point. With that being said, there is one more consideration to think about. Typically, when Garmin releases a new version of a watch like the 570 here, they tend to stop providing meaningful updates to older hardware like the 265 here. That's not to say that the 265 is going to become obsolete in any way. it will continue to work as advertised pretty much forever. Heck, I still have a Garmin Fenix 1 that's over 12 years old that still works and syncs with Garmin Connect. Yeah, the battery life isn't great anymore, but it still works, so that says something about their update process. With that said, that's really the argument for the Forerunner 570. If you like the idea of the Forerunner 265, you want the speaker and microphone, you want the brighter display, and you want to stay future-proof and get further updates down the road, the Forerunner 570 is still in the conversation here because it's unlikely that they'll update this watch for a couple of years, so at least you know for the next couple of years you will receive new features possibly down the road. Now the question at the end of the day for you, the viewer, for the consumer out there looking at these watches, is it worth the price? Is it worth $200 more for the 570 simply for that future-proofing, the brighter display, and the other features I mentioned in this video? I can't answer that for you, but hopefully this video provided some help. But as always, all of this is just my opinion, and I'm just some guy on YouTube in front of a camera here, blabbing by myself. So at this point, I want to hear from you in the comments down below. Are you interested in the new Garmin Forerunner 570? Do you have a 265 right now and you're looking to upgrade to the 570? Do you have an older watch and you're considering the 570? Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this watch, if you're going to jump on it, or if you're just going to wait for the next model. And then after you're done commenting down there, make sure to go down, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this in the future, and then check out all of the links in the description down below where you can head over and purchase your Forerunner 265, 570, 970, a bunch of other watches I'll have listed down there. Those are affiliate links and they do help support this channel, but they don't cost anything extra to you, so you might as well use them. And after that, also make sure to follow me on all of my other social media profiles, my Strava, my Instagram, Threads, all the things will be listed down there along with my merch store. Check that out too. Okay friends, that's the end of this short and sweet video. I hope this cleared up some of the confusion between these two watches, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!